Welcome back to part 3 of a podcast. It's the Financial Streams podcast with Mikey Mike and Joshy K.
How are you, Josh? Good.
Thought we'd continue on. We started part 1 of the series talking about your first job and things you need to consider as part of that.
Yep.
That flowed through to things like HEX debt and as you approach your 20s, saving for a house.
Yeah.
Picking a super fund, starting to think about how you structure your mortgages and traps that you can get into early on, learning how to budget, how to work together with setting goals as a couple.
Yeah.
So I thought today let's jump into the next stage, which is your 40s to 50s.
Good idea.
So a couple of key things that come to mind with a lot of clients who come through in that demographic. So I thought I've got a bit of a screen here of things we can run through and just see where the conversation goes. But I suppose the first thing would be 40s to 50s are usually when, I guess I kind of refer to them as your power years. That tends to be where you're probably about 10 to 15 years into your mortgage. So for a 30-year mortgage, you're about halfway.
Yeah.
Depending on which side of that you're on, 40 or 50. You're starting to get to the top of your career. You're probably starting to get to management positions.
Yeah.
If you've got a business, it's probably starting to mature a little bit.
Yeah.
And so you might actually start thinking about, well, what's that next decade or two going to look like for me? Because retirement's probably going to be part of that.
Yeah.
Kids are going to move out of home. I'll have the mortgage paid off. What things should I be thinking about so that when I'm 50 or 60 and want to pull the trigger, I'm ready to go?
Yeah.
So what are some things that you typically see when you have, let's just say a 45-year-old comes and sees you? What are some typical things they want some help with?
They've probably got through that hump of, putting the kids through school. So they're probably thinking about what does it look like, as you said, kids living home or where they're going to fund uni. So you sort of got kids transitioning from into adulthood. So from a family perspective, it's a matter of, okay, how do we help them set up? And one of the realities of I call it, not me, but this term, the bank of mum and dad, which is like if one of your kids wants to, set them up in terms of real estate property or whatever, what's that look like? How do you help them fund that? Probably another popular question is, do I put more money into super or do I pay down my mortgage? That's sort of a typical
as in
question.
This one or that one?
Yeah. So that's part of, and as you say, their mind's freed up. They're starting to see some capacities, some financial capacity coming their way. They're probably starting to see that there is a finish line that my working career might finish in the next decade or whatever. Or whereas someone in their 20s is like, well, it's just like another lifetime away. So
the focus is different, and I think you're not necessarily focusing on the maximisation or growth side of things. It's almost the optimization time of life where, again, the question becomes, do I start putting money into super or do I pay off my mortgage? And we know from experience that can vary depending on what interest rates are doing and what tax rate that person's in. And that's why it's always important to remind people that financial advice is really personal. There's not a one size fits all. For some people it makes sense to pay off the mortgage versus putting it into super. For some people it can mathematically make sense to do one over the other, but personally just having that bugbear off your back of being debt free might actually enable them to unlock other areas of their life. So it really is quite personal.
And you're right, it's personal and it's what's works best with them, what's their family psychology. So I had a client the other week and they were probably in their 50s, and I was sort of suggesting don't have some money in the offset, so effectively paid off the mortgage but leave your mortgage there, because once your income changes then you might not be able to redraw or go back to the bank because your income serviceability is being affected. But for their family psychology, it's like, no, we want to, it's like a stake in the ground. We want to see that account close. And so that was just a thing for them. And so, as you say, you can come up with some mathematical models, but it's still about, okay, how's it going to apply in your circumstance? And what's in your best interest, but also, works best for you with your family dynamics or what's important to you.
I think that's what makes the difference between a good financial planner and a great one is probably someone that can sit down and actually say, here's the best financial outcome, here's maybe the best lifestyle outcome, and finding a trade-off between the two, or maybe even a slight bias towards the lifestyle one, provided it doesn't upset any long-term financial planning as well.
Yeah.
So that's often something that we see with, maybe we should dive a little bit into that, because, you know, do I pay off debt? Do I put money into super? It's also, well, should I start thinking about optimizing my debt, and how do I optimize my super?
Yeah.
And they're very different conversations as well. So maybe we could start on the debt side of things, given that we've just talked about it. So the client that you saw where it was, look, let's have the offset account fully topped up, so it's offsetting the mortgage. Do you have a preference that you see between an offset account and maybe someone who has a redraw account?
Putting my tax hat on, then definitely offset. It's just the tax dynamics. So the beauty of an offset is effectively, just to recap, an offset means it's a credit balance, or that you've got money in a bank account, and that credit balance that you're sitting there is offset against your mortgage balance only, and so the net amount is what you get paid interest. So effectively you're getting paid by the bank your same rate as what you're paying for your mortgage. So it's a great savings. And why would you do an offset not redraw? Because you sort of get this similar outcome. So redraw is like, you've got spare $5,000, you chuck it off your home loan, bring down that, and you've got a limit, so therefore you can redraw that for other purposes. So purely from a tax perspective, the beauty of an offset account, that mortgage account can be applied against other debt. So for example, today, that's your home mortgage, so non-tax deductible debt, and in 5 years' time, you decide to rent that out because I'm going to downsize, or I'm going to buy my dream home, but I'm going to want to leave this house as a rental property. The beauty of an offset is that you can then just reapply that offset account against your new mortgage, and therefore the interest on that mortgage becomes tax deductible at the higher rate, whereas if you've got a redraw account, you can't redraw for private purposes and say, oh, I'm going to buy my private house and therefore I want to maximise my mortgage on my investment property, which is your current house. So
I think that's a good distinction. So you've got the investment or tax side of paying off your mortgage, and there's ways to think not just about today but down the track as well, what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
So for the, let's just call it the average everyday Australian who may never get an investment property, you know, they're probably thinking, well, do I need an offset account if I'm never going to buy investments? And
it's a good question, and one I've worked through with my son and his wife in the last few weeks, because I was saying for that argument, I said we've got no plans, and for them it made it too complicated. They'd rather see, you know, the mortgage coming down rather than full offset, and so, you know, whatever works for you guys is important. And I think in their scenario, it's something just to watch. There was some fees or additional interest costs of having the offset versus a redraw, so it's something to bear in mind if you're looking at it as well.
Yeah, so there might need to be a minimum amount that you keep in savings to actually make the offset worth it by the time the fee's charged. A couple of things I like to double click on that, because it's not just about the tax and investment, although that's really important. I think just structurally as well, if you pay money into a redraw account, it's not technically your money anymore, which I think a lot of people look at it as, I've got 50 grand of savings there, but what you're actually saying is to redraw means to reborrow. They probably should rename it. So part of that also is if the bank changes their terms and all of a sudden says, we no longer want to offer that as an option. If that was your savings buffer to go, hey, if something goes wrong, we've got 50 grand on the redraw, that could disappear. Whereas an offset account, that's your money. And so you actually keep that. So I think from a peace of mind perspective, even if you're only going to have your own home, that's often why I think about offsets.
That's true.
The other reason I like to personally bucket my money, so I'll have a holiday account, I'll have a savings account, and so having all of that work to save me loan interest works really well, as opposed to going, let's pay it off the mortgage to save interest, and if I need to go on holiday, I'll then reborrow the money. So it's even just a mindset shift as well. So there's a couple of elements at play that I guess we could go down the list of loan optimization. Might keep it there quite general. We might jump back into the superannuation side of things, because there's so many ways you can optimize super. At a broad level, it's, well, what fund do I select? Because there's lots of platforms out there that it's important to remind people that some people have had a bad experience with superannuation in the family. They might have said, oh look, I don't really like super, I don't focus on it, my parents lost a lot of money in the GFC. The thing I want to unpack there is reminding everyone that superannuation is just a trust structure. That's all it is. And so you hear about it on TV, movies, There's that trust fund kid, they get a pot of money that's allocated for them to be released at a certain point in time. That's all superannuation is. It's once you hit retirement, you can then access what's been put away. So how that money gets invested can be so varied. It can be anything from buying into Australian companies to, ETFs, and we can unpack a little bit about types of investments. It could be property, collector's cars, artwork. Yeah, so how it's invested is really personal to an individual. So that's just something I like to remind people about what superannuation actually is.
And I think it's important because, anecdotally, people think it's either not my money, it's government's money, it's my employer's money, whatever. There's a disassociation, generally speaking, in the early part of people's working life. But I think, especially in this era, we're talking about people in the 40s and 50s, the pennies start to drop. I can almost taste and see what my balance looks like and what I'm going to live on when I retire. So there is a greater association, and I suppose there's a couple of questions that do spring out. Like I said, mortgage versus super. People start to inquire or think about how much money do I need to have my super to retire on. So that's sort of what comes through. And I suppose the composition of your super funds, people had a bad experience with the share market drop, whatever. But do you want to sort of unpack a bit more about like a risk profile or what that looks like? Just in a general, we can spend all day talking about that.
Yeah, there is a lot.
But maybe just in a general speaking, so I do get people come in and ask the question, do you know what your investment mix looks like in whatever ABC super fund? They don't know. It's just the default, whatever the default was when they're 20s.
And that's key, terminology. So they just go, look, I'm in the balanced fund with, I won't mention any fund names, but they call it balanced. Whereas I picture that, I'm a bit old school with my visuals, and I picture someone effectively standing on a seesaw in a playground. To me, that's balanced, 50-50. That's often not what a balanced fund actually is. Some factor in inflation, so they've got to actually bump it up. Maybe 70% of your money is designed to grow, 30% designed to protect. But the way, risk profiling is the question the label you gave it, which doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people. So I might unpack that a little bit.
Unpack it a bit.
Effectively, what it's saying is, how do you behave when times are good, and how do you behave when times are bad, and trying to find a trade-off between it. Because we all say, we're happy to go full health forever on growth companies, we want those good returns. Is that still how we feel when markets are down 10%? And that's often, it's no different than anything else with behavior. It's saying, if you're running a business, it's how do I act with my employees on my worst day and also my best day. That kind of gives you your average on your temperament, and it's the same thing with investing. So
just to unpack that, say growth and defensive, do you want to unpack some examples of what those terms that, once again, people might not be familiar with?
That's a good point. So growth assets are things that are designed to increase the capital value of what you've invested. So things that come to mind would be, Australian shares. If you buy assets that are housed within Australia and obviously the stock exchange, you expect that to go up in value over time, not potentially producing income for you. Some stocks pay dividends, but purely capital in nature. Property might be another one, but it's also a hybrid, where depending on how you look at property, you could say, okay, it's a $500,000 asset that'll go up in value 4% per year, but it's also paying me X amount of dollars in income. So is it actually a defensive asset or a growth one? You start bringing gearing into it. And I'm getting a little bit off track. It's such a big topic. But typically growth assets are literally designed to grow over time. You expect them to go up over the long term, whereas defensive assets are more of a handbrake or an income producing asset to limit the amount of volatility. So you would expect that, potentially if property markets drop, that is in the capital value, well, the percentage of rent, if it stays the same, actually gives you a higher yield. So those defensive assets around fixed income would increase.
So we'll just use a couple of everyday examples maybe. So defensive asset would be
cash, term deposits.
A term deposit with a major Australian bank is probably one of the more conservative, but you get a return, but it's government guaranteed on the capital side of it. If it's a major bank, typically.
Yeah, it's under 250,000.
250k, sorry. So it's one extreme, so money in the bank, not under your bed, just money in the bank. And then the other extreme would be a volatile tech stock somewhere listed in the world that you could triple your money tomorrow, but then it could
I feel like you're tipping around Bitcoin.
Yeah. But yeah, there I suppose a couple of everyday examples. And so the asset mix, which is what you're sort of saying with your balance fund, which is I agree with you, every day people would say a balance fund would be mix of both, about half each. Sometimes the detail comes unraveled because the balance fund might be 70% more volatile and 30% more defensive. So they're the sort of things to unpack, I suppose, as in the conversations, or for people to be aware of, for their own superannuation balance, how much are they exposed to the marketplace?
What are you in? If you're in your 20s and 30s and you're really wanting to grow for the next couple of years, if you're sitting in cash or something quite conservative, is that serving you well? And at the same token, if you're 5 years out from retirement and yet 90% of your money is designed to grow and 10% is designed to protect, maybe that's a problem when we need to back off a little bit. And that's different for everyone. Because it's important to remind people that even when you retire at 60 or 65, you don't just withdraw your money from super and put it under the bed. It's going to continue to be invested, and ideally for the next 20 or 30 years. So it's important to consider that as well. This is where 40s and 50s, and we'll wrap up shortly, but around the optimization side, it's important that you start to actually get a sense of where exactly you're at and where you're going, so you can bridge any gaps. So you mentioned at the start, how much super do I need? And that really depends on, well, how much do you plan on spending in retirement? And ASFA, which is an acronym, has some standards around typically what people spend, and it's somewhere between $52,000 a year, so $1,000 a week, and around $72,000 a year.
Per individual or couple?
As a couple,
right.
Depending if you want overseas travel, whether you've got kids, there's so many variabilities, but I guess a nice rule of thumb would probably be 2/3 of whatever income you were earning pre-retirement, because that kind of accounts for maybe your tax rate that you were paying previously. So that's where you start to go, okay, well, if I retire at 60 and I'm going to live into my 90s, which is quite likely, I need to build up enough wealth to last me for 30 years. If I'm spending $100,000 a year, you can do the math on that, that's $3 million in today's money. So you've only got between your 20s and your 60s, so that's 40 years to actually save up enough for that final 30. So really wanting to step on the gas and how you optimize that. So depends which direction we want to go in the next video. I suppose we could unpack, again, your loans, superannuation, types of investments. You hear acronyms like ETFs thrown around, your exchange traded funds.
I think it'd be good to unpack ETF, because that's been a popular acronym anecdotally in the last few years. Unpack it from its origin with Jack Bogle and all that sort of stuff, and what the philosophy sits behind it, and now where it's morphed into a sort of very much a mainstream product, but people, you just hear people talk about, I've got an ETF, I'm thinking about an ETF. Unpack it maybe.
And maybe we should do an unpack as well. Let us know if you're interested in the comments around just unpacking some of that terminology that you hear, because somebody will throw out a buzzword as if it means they're doing the right thing. So they say, I'm negatively gearing. And they straight away go, that's a great strategy, not really realising what it means and whether it's suitable. I've got some ETFs, so maybe we should unpack that as well. We didn't even get to contributions into super.
Cover that in the future one.
I think we'll have to do part 4. We'll stick with 40s and 50s and then go from there.
Unpack there.
But thank you very much for joining us today, Michael. That was good.
Thanks.
Excellent. We'll see you in the next one.
See you.